You ever wake up thinking you know exactly how your day's going to go, only to have reality step in and slap you sideways? Let me ask you, have you ever walked out to your car and found a note on the front seat, placed there by someone who'd broken in, calmly telling you the police have all your belongings? Imagine your kid is staring at you from the curb, backpack on, both of you late, and you have no idea what's just happened. That was my morning, one I'll never forget. This was a few years ago, while I was serving overseas with the U.S. military, stationed in a place that, let's just say, didn't exactly make TripAdvisor's top 10. There's a certain grayness that hangs over some places, like the city itself knows it's tired. That morning, the streets were still half asleep, a few stray dogs weaving through the alleys, the air thick with the smell of last night's rain and exhaust fumes. The kind of morning that dares you to trust it, right before it pulls the rug out from under your feet. Now, I'll paint you the scene. The neighborhood is a patchwork of cracked sidewalks, rusty storefront shutters, little knots of people who always seem to be waiting for something that never comes. Petty crime is just part of the background hum. Bikes disappearing, bags going missing, and a long parade of panhandlers with stories that start to blur together if you're here long enough. The locals have a kind of wary truce with us, sometimes friendly, sometimes suspicious, always watching. But what I didn't know until I'd been there a while is that the local cops have their own little racket. Not the kind you see in movies, but something subtler, baked right into the machinery of daily life. Here's how it works. If your car's inspection sticker is out of date, or even looks like it might be, they'll send someone, often not even a cop, to check it out. If it's not up to code, they don't just ticket you. No, that would be too simple. They'll jimmy the lock, take everything out of your car, and leave a note. Your belongings are at the police station. You want your stuff back? Show up, pay your fine, get a stern warning, and they'll hand it all over. That morning, it was my turn. My mind was already spinning as I stood in the faint shadow of my car, that stupid note fluttering in the breeze. My daughter, barely 9, still waking up, looked up at me with these big, worried eyes. "Are we still going to school?" she asked, voice trembling just a little, and I swear I felt something twist in my gut. The problem was my inspection sticker wasn't out of date. In fact, I checked it just last week because I'd heard stories about people getting their cars broken into, their stuff vanished into the labyrinth of the local police station. So what the hell was this? Then, as if things couldn't get worse, I remembered what I'd stashed in the glove box the night before. 3 U.S. passports, mine, my wife's, and my kids. I'd put them there, thinking I'd grab them on the way to base for some paperwork. Locked the doors. Triple-checked. And yet, here I was, locked out of normalcy, watching the world tilt just a little further. I try not to let my daughter see how rattled I was. I fumbled for my phone, heart beating in my ears, thinking maybe I'd missed something, maybe there was a mistake. But the note was clear, written in clipped, business-like script, no sign of apology or explanation. We hitch a ride with a neighbor, the car radio blaring tinny local pop music, the two of us silent in the back seat. Every pothole seemed to jolt me deeper into a sense of unreality. I couldn't shake the image of someone rifling through my things, pawing through passports, school papers, the pile of parking tickets I'd meant to deal with, my daughter's favorite pencil case. The police station was an old, squat building set back from the road behind a rusted fence. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed and flickered. I stepped up to the desk, note in hand, rehearsing my question. What the hell happened here? My daughter hovered close, clutching my sleeve, watching everything with wide, unblinking eyes. The desk sergeant barely looked up at me. I slid the note across, my voice low, trying to keep my anger in check. "You have my stuff. My car's inspection is up to date. What's going on?" He shrugged, flipping through a battered logbook. "If you want your things, you pay the fine. Sticker's not valid." I handed him the inspection documents, the real ones, still current, still legal, and watched as he studied them, his expression flickering for just a moment. He grunted, waved me over to a row of battered chairs, told me to wait. The minutes dragged, the air thick with tension and the distant sound of someone arguing behind a closed door. While I waited, I thought about all the little things we do, the routines that keep us anchored, checking the locks, putting passports in the glove box, tucking your kid's lunch in her backpack. How quickly all that normalcy can vanish, replaced by the strange, unsettling reality of being completely powerless. It finally called me up. "We apologize," the sergeant said, his voice suddenly slippery. "There was a mistake. You'll get your things back." I asked, "Can I file a report?" "Someone broke into my car, took my property." He looked at me like I'd just asked him for the moon. "Nothing was stolen," he insisted, as if the logic of their system was airtight, as if I was the crazy one. But then something clicked. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe just a flash of spite. I told him, "My wife's passport is missing. I need a report for the U.S. Embassy. They're going to want to know who took it, since you have a log." I watched his face go pale, the mask slipping for just a second. Suddenly, he was stammering, trying to talk me out of it, telling me it was unnecessary. I insisted. I filed a report. Then I contacted the embassy, gave them every detail, the time, the place, the names on the note, the copy of the police report. It felt like grabbing a live wire, the way the tension jumped from him to me, filling the room with a charge that wouldn't dissipate. A week later, I got word from the embassy. They'd handled it. New passports were on the way, no charge. And the guy who'd broken into my car? He got picked up, fined, and, rumor had it, was looking at more charges for tampering with foreign documents. I wish I could have seen his face when the local cops showed up at his door, calling him in for a conversation. Maybe he finally realized that some rackets aren't worth the trouble. After that, I kept my doors locked, my papers closer, my trust at arm's length. I didn't have any more run-ins until the day I finally rotated home. But there's something about waking up in a foreign place and realizing just how quickly the rules can change, how the ground can shift beneath your feet without warning. Some mornings, even now, I still look for a note on my seat, half expecting the world to turn upside down all over again. You ever get that feeling? When you're standing in a government office, the walls humming with old electricity, the paint peeling in slow motion, and you suddenly realize you're not the one in control? That's how I felt sitting there in that plastic chair, my daughter tracing invisible patterns on her jeans, the air growing heavier with every passing second. It's funny how time seems to slow down when you're waiting for someone else to decide your fate. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of my stuff through a grimy window behind the counter. A tangle of backpacks, paperwork, my daughter's stuffed rabbit with the ear coming loose. All just out of reach, as if I'd wandered into some absurdist play and forgotten my lines. The sergeant called me up again, eyes darting. He slid my things across the counter in a battered plastic crate, hands shaking just a bit. My daughter dove for her backpack, relief flooding her face. I rifled through the stack, heart pounding. Passports, check. School papers, check. Even the cheap sunglasses I kept in the cup holder. But my wife's passport was missing. I turned to the sergeant, feeling that old military edge rise up in my voice. "There's a document missing. My wife's passport. Where is it?" He glanced at the logbook, then at me. Whatever was brought in is what's there. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the gears turning. This wasn't supposed to be complicated. Usually, people just took their lumps and paid the fine. I wasn't playing along. I told him I needed a police report for the embassy, loud enough that the other people in the lobby looked up from their phones. That's when a mood shifted. The sergeant's mouth flattened into a thin line. He stood, disappeared through a door, left me under the yellow lights with my kid and a growing sense of unease. My daughter squeezed my hand, whispered, "Are we in trouble?" I shook my head, forced a smile, but even I didn't believe it. Minutes later, he came back, a new officer trailing behind him. This one had a sharper uniform, pressed and starchy, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He apologized again, officially, formally, the way you do when you're trying to keep something under wraps. He produced a blank incident report and told me to fill it out. His hand hovered just above the page as I wrote, like he wanted to grab the pen away at any moment. I wrote down everything. What was taken, who had access, the note left in my car. My daughter leaned against me, watching the clock on the wall. The officer read over my shoulder, lips pursed. When I finished, he tore off the top sheet and told me to wait while they processed it. The wait dragged on. Outside, a siren wailed, then faded. The police station felt smaller, the air sharper, every noise magnified. In that moment, I realized just how exposed I was. This wasn't home. I was a guest in a system I didn't understand, playing by rules that could shift without warning. Anxiety prickled along my skin. Finally, the officer returned, report in hand, eyes hard. Here, you can contact your embassy. This is all we can do. That was it. Transaction complete. The passport was officially missing. My daughter clung to my arm as we walked out into the gray morning, the city already awake and indifferent to our little crisis. I loaded her into the neighbor's car, handed her the rabbit, and tried to act like everything was fine. On the way to base, my phone buzzed. It was my wife, already hearing rumors about what had happened, her voice tense. I tried to explain it, but how do you explain a system designed to keep you off balance? The whole thing felt like a fever dream, one where you keep running into the same locked door, no matter which hallway you take. We arrived at the base just as the gates swung open for the morning rush. Uniforms everywhere, the sharp tang of diesel, the sound of boots on wet pavement. I parked, scanned my ID, did my best to look normal. The guard glanced at my daughter, offered her a lollipop. She smiled, shy and tired, and for a second I felt like maybe we could shake this off. Inside, I found a quiet corner in the admin building and dialed the embassy. There's a special kind of tension in that first call, the one where you have to admit you've lost something important, that you need help. The woman on the other end was calm, professional, but I could tell she'd heard stories like this before. She took down every detail, asked for the report number, and promised they'd be in touch soon. After I hung up, I sat there, staring at my hands. They were shaking, not from fear exactly, but from the realization that things could have been so much worse. Passport can be replaced, but trust, that's a different story. My wife called again, voice softer now, and I promised her it would all work out. That night, after my daughter was asleep, I sat in the living room and listened to the rain. Every sound outside made me tense. The neighborhood dogs barked, someone's radio blared through an open window, and I thought about how close we'd come to losing more than just some paperwork. The next morning, an email from the embassy. They were looking into the matter. They'd flagged the missing passport and were coordinating with the local authorities. The tone was polite, but underneath it I could sense a quiet urgency, like maybe, just maybe, this would be a bigger deal than the cops had expected. Work that day felt surreal. The base was a machine, routine, orders, schedules, while outside the city spun on, oblivious. At lunch, I told a buddy what had happened. He laughed, shook his head. That's just how it goes here, man. You have to keep your head on a swivel. The system's not built for us. I nodded, but inside I felt something sour. I didn't want to accept that. Didn't want to let this place turn me into someone who just shrugs and moves on. That night, I double-checked the locks, hid my valuables deeper, made sure my daughter's rabbit was tucked in with her, just in case. But even as I tried to settle back into routine, that nagging sense of vulnerability wouldn't let go. Every time I walked out to my car, I checked the windows twice. Every time my phone rang, I braced for bad news. Even my daughter seemed quieter, eyes darting to the glove box every morning, just to make sure nothing had disappeared overnight. A few days later, I got another email from the embassy. They'd processed the report, were issuing replacement passports for me, my wife, and my daughter. No charge. We are also following up with the local authorities regarding the circumstances of the theft. The note read, cool and formal, but I could almost feel the heat behind those words. That afternoon, as I walked to the car after work, a local kid darted across the street, looked at me, and then quickly away. For a second, I wondered if he'd been one of the ones watching my car that night. The feeling lingered, paranoia, maybe, or just the knowledge that things here could go sideways fast, and you'd never see it coming. The strangest part is how quickly you adapt to living with that gnawing sense of unease. There's no dramatic soundtrack, no warning bells, just the slow, grinding realization that you have to watch your own back every second. I started parking under the one flickering streetlight, even if it meant walking a little further at night. I memorized the rhythm of a neighborhood. The times when the street vendors packed up, the hours when the alley behind our apartment went completely still, the faces that appeared and disappeared like clockwork. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a low-grade static, always buzzing in the background. I caught myself triple-checking every lock, checking and rechecking the glove box, as if I could ward off trouble with sheer vigilance. My wife teased me at first, then stopped when she saw the way my hands shook when I fumbled for my keys. My daughter, always perceptive, started slipping her backpack under the front seat, hiding her tiny treasures as if she understood that sometimes even grown-ups couldn't keep things safe. The embassy had told me to wait, that they'd handle it, but I could feel the weight of unfinished business pressing on my chest. Every morning, I'd glance across the parking lot, half expecting to see another note fluttering against the glass. I'd replay that morning again and again, looking for something I could have done differently. Should I have left the passports at home, or been less trusting of the system? It didn't matter. What was done was done. About a week after I filed the police report, I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table, early morning light seeping through the blinds, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The kind that always makes your stomach lurch. I answered, trying to sound more alert than I felt. It was someone from the embassy. Calm, clipped voice. They'd reviewed my report, confirmed the details, and were in active communication with local law enforcement. The phrase hung in the air, formal and chilly. Then, almost as an afterthought, the officer told me that the individual who'd processed my car, meaning the one who'd broken in and left a note, had been identified and brought in for questioning. Apparently, the local police had a file on him as thick as a phone book. He's being charged, the officer said. We're monitoring the situation closely. You did the right thing filing the report. I thanked her, hung up, stared at my hands for a long time. My wife came in, wrapped in her robe, asking what was wrong. I told her everything. She listened, face pale in the dawn light, her coffee forgotten. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. And for a moment, it was just us again, two Americans far from home, trying to hold on to some sense of normal. But as the days passed, that sense of normal kept slipping further away. There were odd moments, tiny, almost unnoticeable things that kept piling up. Once I came out of the car and found a small, dirty handprint on the rear window. Another time, I spotted a figure at the edge of the lot, just standing there, watching. When I locked eyes with him, he turned and vanished into the labyrinth of alleyways. Work, at least, was a relief. The base was its own world, clean, orderly, insulated from the chaos outside. Inside those gates, it was all familiar routines and clear expectations, people who knew how to follow rules. But every time I left, passing through the checkpoint, it was like wading back into murky water. There was no telling what I might step on. One afternoon, as I was leaving work, my phone rang again. It was the embassy. They wanted me to come in, bring any additional documentation I had about the incident. Just to make sure all our records are in order, the voice said, smooth but urgent. I agreed, made the appointment, and tried not to read too much into it. That night, as I drove home, I kept thinking about the whole twisted chain of events, how a simple mistake, a misplaced trust, had spiraled into this slow-burning anxiety. The streetlights flickered past, their shadows long and crooked across the cracked pavement. I wondered if the man who'd broken into my car was sitting somewhere nearby, waiting for the fallout, or if he'd already moved on, looking for his next target. I barely slept that night. Every noise outside set my nerves jangling. Somewhere in the building, a dog barked and wouldn't stop. My wife lay beside me, breathing slow and deep, but I could tell she was awake too, her hand tightening around mine each time the wind rattled the windows. Morning came, pale and gray. I got my daughter ready for school, walked her to the car, and watched her buckle herself in with practice care. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught sight of a man in a faded jacket, lurking by the alley. He wasn't doing anything, just watching. When he saw me looking, he gave the smallest of nods. It wasn't friendly. It was a warning. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just a single incident. It was a message. A reminder that no matter how careful you are, how many precautions you take, there's always someone willing to test the limits, push a little further, see what they can get away with. And if you push back, if you shine a light where they don't want it, they notice. At the embassy, the security was tight, the air cold and clean. The staff greeted me by name, took my documents, asked me to walk through what happened one more time. I could feel their eyes on me, measuring, weighing, trying to fit my story into their own mosaic of incidents and patterns. Afterward, as I sat in the waiting area, I overheard two embassy workers talking in low voices. One of them mentioned the police report, said something about patterns emerging. The other just shook her head. It's always something, isn't it? Always someone pushing their luck. Driving home, the city felt different, closer, tighter, more suffocating. I rolled up the windows, locked the doors, told myself it was just for safety. But deep down, I knew it was something more. The rules were shifting again, and I had no idea where the new boundaries were. It's strange how quickly suspicion becomes part of your routine. The city had always felt foreign, but now it felt personal, like it had eyes on me. I found myself glancing into every alley, memorizing the shape of every shadow. The once familiar route from my apartment to the base turned into a gauntlet, each block heavy with possibility. Maybe it was paranoia, but maybe not, because once someone's been in your space, rooting through your life, you realize how thin the walls are. At home, the atmosphere shifted. My wife moved more quietly, started double-checking the windows, even during the day. We began leaving lights on at night, even in rooms we weren't using. My daughter's laughter grew softer, replaced by the kind of silence that sticks to your skin. Every time a car slowed in front of our building, my wife would pause mid-sentence, her eyes darting to the window. Yet, the world didn't stop spinning. The city outside thrummed with its usual noise, vendors hawking fruit, motorcycles sputtering by, the distant call to prayer echoing down the avenue. Even as I tried to keep my routine, to be the steady one for my family, the anxiety settled deeper like sediment in water. Then, a week after my trip to the embassy, I got an unexpected call. This time, the number was local, the connection scratchy and uneven. A voice introduced himself as a liaison officer with the local police. He said he needed to speak with me in person about the ongoing situation. His tone was professional, but there was something beneath it, tight control, like he was holding something back. I agreed to meet, arranging for him to come to the base. The guardhouse felt safer, the neutral ground of military authority. When he arrived, his uniform was immaculate, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. We sat at a metal table just inside the perimeter. He wasted no time. "We've taken action regarding the individual who tampered with your car," he began, fingers drumming on the tabletop. "He's been charged with theft of foreign property, as well as unauthorized access to government documents." His words felt rehearsed. I nodded, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He paused, looked around, then leaned in. "There's some concern on our end that this sort of thing is part of a larger pattern. You're not the only foreigner who's been targeted. There are others. Some," he hesitated, then pressed on, "some cases haven't ended as well as yours." A chill ran down my spine. It was one thing to feel like a target. It was another to know you were one. "Are my family and I in any danger?" I asked, voice low. He considered the question, then shook his head. "At this time, there's no indication of a specific threat against you. But I would advise vigilance. Be aware of your surroundings. And if anything seems off, contact us immediately." We ended the meeting with the kind of formal handshake that carries more warning than reassurance. He left the base quickly, shoulders hunched as he disappeared into the sunlight. I stood there for a moment, staring at the spot where he'd been, my thoughts racing. Was this just about a stolen passport? Or was it something more? A network, a web of small-time hustlers and corrupt officials, each playing their part in a bigger game? Was I just unlucky, or had I stumbled onto a system that didn't want to be noticed? That afternoon, my wife found me standing at the window, watching the street below. She didn't say anything, just handed me a mug of coffee, her hand lingering on my shoulder. There were unspoken questions in her eyes, but neither of us voiced them. We both knew the rules had changed. Later that night, after my daughter had gone to sleep, we sat at the kitchen table, talking in whispers. I told my wife about the liaison officer, about what he'd said. She listened, her jaw clenched, nodding along. We agreed to be careful, to check in regularly, to keep important documents hidden, to never go anywhere alone if we could help it. Sleep came in fits and starts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that note on the car seat, the cold efficiency of someone who knew exactly what to look for. My dreams filled with echoes of footsteps in a hallway, the distant slam of a door, the feeling of being watched. A few days passed with no new incidents. I let myself hope the worst was behind us. Then, one morning as I walked my daughter to the car, I noticed a small envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. My stomach dropped. I hesitated before opening it, heart hammering in my chest. Inside was a single scrap of paper, folded twice. No threats, no demands. Just one line, scrawled in shaky handwriting. Some things are better left alone. For a moment, the world spun. The street around me felt too quiet, the silence loaded. I looked up and down the block, searching for anyone who might be watching. Nothing. Just the endless hum of the city, oblivious and uncaring. I showed the note to my wife. She read it, hands trembling. "What does it mean?" she whispered. I didn't know. All I knew was that the sense of unease that had been a dull ache was now a living thing, pressing in from every side. I called the liaison officer, reported the note, and followed every instruction to the letter. But inside, I felt the boundaries of normal life eroding bit by bit. The days that followed passed in a blur of vigilance. I grew familiar with every face on our block, every car that parked too long, every stranger who glanced our way. I found myself lying awake at night, listening for footsteps in the hallway, every creak and groan of the old building setting my nerves on edge. One evening, as I sat by the window, watching the last traces of daylight slip away, I realized how much had changed. The familiar had become unfamiliar, comfort replaced by an uneasy truce with the world outside. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew, with a cold certainty, that nothing would ever feel quite the same. I wish I could say I handled it all with calm military discipline, but the truth is, there's something about having your life sifted through by strangers that scrapes away your cool, layer by layer. That little envelope under my wiper was like a tiny fracture in the glass of normal life, a line that only widened as the days went on. From that morning forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living inside someone else's story. Every routine, brushing my teeth, lacing my boots, starting the car, was shadowed by the question, who's watching and why? My wife started keeping her phone within reach, even at home. My daughter, sensing the shift, asked me if the police were mad at us. I wanted to tell her the truth, but what would I even say? I kept replaying that phrase from the note. Asterisk, some things are better left alone. Asterisk, was it a warning or a threat? And who was it meant for? Me, the embassy, or maybe the cop who'd suddenly gotten cold feet? I tried not to let my imagination run wild, but it was impossible to keep the thoughts at bay. Every little sound, the whine of a distant moped, the sharp bark of a neighbor's dog, felt loaded, like the soundtrack to a suspense film I never meant to star in. A week went by with no further incidents. Still, the weight of waiting was exhausting. I caught myself watching the street more than usual, studying the flow of people and cars. The city kept up its old rhythm. Kids playing soccer on uneven sidewalks, laundry flapping from every window, the daily chaos of markets and street vendors. I wanted so badly to slip back into the background, to become invisible again. One afternoon, the phone rang, another unknown number. My hands trembled as I answered. A calm, accented voice introduced himself as a representative from the embassy's security office. He thanked me for my patience and asked if I could come in for a brief follow-up. I agreed, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. Just routine, he said, but after everything, nothing felt routine anymore. That evening, I prepared everything they might ask for: copies of the police report, email printouts, a timeline of the break-in. My wife helped, her movements precise, as if order could keep the darkness at bay. After our daughter went to bed, we sat together in the quiet, hands wrapped around mugs of tea gone cold. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. But her voice betrayed the doubt she was trying to hide. The next morning, I left for the embassy early. The streets felt narrower, buildings crowding closer than before. When I arrived, I passed through layers of security, guards with unreadable faces, metal detectors, thick glass windows. Inside, the air was filtered and cool, the outside world held at bay. A woman from a security office met me in a quiet conference room. She was kind but brisk, her questions careful and direct. She asked me to recount everything again: the break-in, The missing passport, the police response, the envelope. She wrote down every detail, nodding silently, occasionally glancing at her watch. "Has anyone tried to contact you since?" she asked. "Only that note," I replied. "Nothing else. I don't know if I'm being paranoid, but—" She held up a hand. "You're not being paranoid. These things happen. It's important to be vigilant. You did the right thing coming to us." I felt a little better hearing it from her, but the words did little to loosen the knot in my stomach. Before I left, she gave me a card with a direct line. "If anything else happens, anything at all, call, day or night." Back on the street, the sunlight felt harsher, the city louder. I kept my head down, moved quickly, tried to ignore the prickling between my shoulders. On the way home, I bought pastries from a vendor I'd never seen before. He smiled too widely, pressing the bag into my hands with a wink. "Stay safe, my friend." I didn't respond, just nodded and hurried away. When I got home, my wife met me at the door, eyes wide. "Did they say what they do?" she asked. I shook my head. "They're looking into it," I said, forcing a smile. "They have people for this." That night, after dinner, we double-checked the locks, front door, balcony, every window, even the old utility hatch in the back hallway. We sat together on the sofa, not talking, just listening to the city's noise press against the thin glass of our living room. Later, as I put my daughter to bed, she asked, "Are we still safe here, Daddy?" I paused, tucking her in tighter. "We're safe. I promise." But even as I said it, I could hear the unspoken question hanging in the dark. How much longer would that be true? That promise haunted me, echoing through my dreams. I woke up twice that night, heart pounding, convinced I'd heard footsteps in the hallway. Each time, the apartment was still, but the anxiety clung to me, a cold, invisible hand pressing on my chest. A few days later, a message arrived, slipped under the door this time. No envelope, just a single piece of paper, folded small enough to fit in a palm. The handwriting was different, hurried and rough. For words, "Let it go. Now." No signature. No hint of who had left it. Only the sound of my own pulse in my ears as I read it over and over. I locked the door, drew the curtains, and sat at the table with my head in my hands. The walls felt thinner than ever. The paper felt almost weightless in my hands, but the words on it pressed down like a physical burden. Asterisk, let it go. Now. Asterisk, simple, final. I slid the note into a kitchen drawer and closed it slowly, as if moving too fast might set off an alarm I couldn't hear. My wife found me standing in the middle of the kitchen, staring at nothing. She didn't ask what was wrong. Instead, she walked over and gently took my hand. For a long moment, we just stood there, breathing in sync, letting the silence fill in the things we couldn't say. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak in the building felt deliberate, every shadow in the hallway too dense, too purposeful. The city outside was a jumble of late-night arguments and barking dogs and the distant thump of music from a nearby club. Even with all that noise, the apartment felt eerily quiet, a vacuum where all the normal sounds of life were sucked away, replaced with the tension of waiting. I lay awake, running through every possible scenario. What do they want from me? Was this about the police report, the embassy, something I'd done without realizing? My mind spun with questions that led only to more questions. All I knew was that the message was clear: back off, or things would get worse. The next morning, I called the embassy again. My voice was tight, strained, barely more than a whisper. I explained about the new note, how it had been left inside my building. No envelope, no explanation. The security officer listened carefully, then asked me to scan and email a photo of the note. "We'll document everything," she said. "We're increasing patrols near your residence. In the meantime, stay alert and try to keep to your routines as much as possible. If anything seems off, contact us immediately." I promised I would, but the truth is, nothing felt routine anymore. The city itself seemed to sense the shift. That day, I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before. A neighbor's windows, always shuttered now. The old man who ran the corner shop, suddenly polite but distant. A group of teenagers who used to laugh and linger by the stairwell, now gone, replaced by two silent men who watched me every time I left the building. Work offered no escape. Even within the perimeter of the base, I found myself jumping at unexpected sounds, checking my phone for messages I hoped wouldn't come. The small talk in a break room felt surreal, like everyone else was reading from a script I'd long since forgotten. When I got home that night, my wife was waiting at the door. "Someone called for you," she said. Didn't leave a name, just said they'd try again. She tried to keep her voice steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. Dinner was tense, every fork scraping on the plates louder than it should have been. My daughter picked at her food, glancing nervously between us. Afterward, I sat with her on the couch and let her talk about her day. She rambled about her favorite teacher, a new song she'd learned, but I could tell she was watching me for signs that everything was okay. I put her to bed early, tucking her in twice, maybe 3 times before finally letting her drift off. In the living room, my wife and I sat close. The TV turned low, just for the company of familiar voices. After she'd gone to bed, I found myself at the window again, watching the street. A car idled at the curb longer than usual. I stared until it finally moved on, its taillights swallowed by the night. I caught my reflection in the glass, a man hollowed out by worry, jaw tight, eyes dark with exhaustion. Another day passed. Another note appeared, this one taped to the outside of our door. Asterisk, you've been warned. Last chance. Asterisk, the handwriting was almost identical to the first note under the wiper. It was as if someone wanted me to know it was personal now. Not just a random warning, but a message meant specifically for me. I called the embassy, voice shaking. This time, the security officer sounded concerned. "We're escalating this," she said. "I want you and your family to pack a go bag. Essentials only. If we need to relocate you, we'll contact you immediately. In the meantime, don't engage, don't respond, don't provoke." I hung up, heart racing, and began packing what little we'd need: passports, a change of clothes, the folder of documents from the embassy. My wife did the same, quietly, methodically, eyes focused straight ahead. That night, we slept in shifts, one of us always awake, always listening. The apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in, the city outside pressing in on all sides. Morning came, but the sunlight brought no relief. I walked my daughter to school, hand gripping hers a little too tightly. I felt eyes on us. Maybe real, maybe imagined, but the sensation was impossible to shake. Even my daughter, usually chatty, was silent. She looked up at me, searching my face for reassurance I couldn't quite give. I dropped her off, watched until she was inside, then walked back home through streets that felt like they were holding their breath. Every face I passed seemed to flicker with suspicion or indifference or something colder. I tried to keep my head down, but inside, the tension was building to a fever pitch. By the time I reached our building, I felt it, a certainty that something had shifted. The door to our apartment was slightly ajar. I froze, heart pounding so hard I thought I might faint. For a few seconds, I just stood there listening. The hallway was silent, unnaturally so. I edged forward, every sense straining, every muscle ready to bolt. Inside, nothing looked out of place. No drawers open, no signs of a struggle. But on the kitchen table, perfectly centered, was another envelope. This one was sealed, heavier than the others. My name was written on the front in bold, deliberate handwriting. My hands shook as I reached for it, dreading what I might find inside. I slid my thumb under the envelope flap, heart thrumming in my throat, half expecting something vile to spill out. Instead, a stack of photos slid onto the table, face down at first, their glossy backs winking in the early morning light. My breath caught. My first thought was asterisk, not my family. Please, not my family. Asterisk with trembling hands, I flipped through them. The first photo was of me and my daughter walking to the car, her small hand in mine, our heads bent in quiet conversation. The next, my wife unlocking the door to our building, her face turned to check the street behind her. Another, the 3 of us on the balcony, my daughter chasing bubbles in the fading orange light. Every photo was recent, everyone taken without our knowledge. Different angles, different times of day. In some, the shots were so close it made my skin crawl. Someone had been right there, only a few paces away, camera rays hidden in plain sight. Buried in the stack was a folded sheet of paper. The message was short, typed in neat black letters this time. "You've got their attention now. There's nothing here for you. Let it die. Or it won't just be notes next time. The edges of my vision blurred. I felt cold, a sickening chill wrapping around my chest. I stood motionless, hands braced on the table, staring at the words as if I could will them to make sense. The photos spilled across the wood like a silent accusation. My first impulse was to grab my phone, but then a wave of panic crashed over me. What if they were watching even now, waiting to see what I'd do next? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I reached for the curtains, yanking them shut, shutting out the thin, searching daylight. I called the embassy's emergency line. My voice was flat, shaky as I described the photos and the new threat. I could hear typing in the background as the officer took my statement. Then her voice grew sharper. "Mr. Adams, stay where you are. Lock every door. A security team will be at your location in under an hour. Don't leave. Don't answer the door for anyone but our people. We'll identify ourselves." I hung up and locked every bolt in the apartment, shoving a chair under the knob for good measure. My wife's face was white when I showed her the photos. She sat down heavily, hand over her mouth, eyes shining with terror and something else, fury. We waited in that tense, airless silence, every noise from the street a potential threat. I gathered the photos, the envelope, every note we'd received, and tucked them all in a backpack with our passports and go-bags. My daughter was still at school, blissfully unaware, her small world mercifully untouched for now. The embassy team arrived faster than I expected. They moved with crisp precision, checking IDs, scanning the stairwell, speaking into radios clipped to their belts. 2 plainclothes agents swept the apartment, then sat us down in the living room. Their questions came fast and quiet. Details, timelines, anyone who might hold a grudge, every strange face or vehicle in the neighborhood. When I laid out the photos, their professionalism cracked for a split second. One agent muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "We're escalating this with the local authorities," the senior agent told me. "We can arrange temporary relocation for your family. We'll provide transportation discreetly. You should pack what you need now." My wife looked at me, desperate for a sign. "Is this really necessary?" she whispered. I looked at the photos, then back at her. "Yes, I think it is." Packing was frantic but silent. I moved on muscle memory, shoving essentials into duffels, grabbing the folder of documents, unplugging electronics almost without thinking. The agents checked and rechecked the windows, peered out through the peephole, radioed to someone waiting in a vehicle outside. When it was time to go, we moved quickly, down the stairs, out the back door, into an unmarked van. My daughter was picked up from school by an embassy staffer, a kind woman who kept her distracted with gentle conversation and a chocolate bar. My daughter glanced at me, eyes wide and uncertain, but didn't ask questions, not yet. We drove in silence, city blocks passing in a blur. The agent spoke softly into radios, scanning the rearview mirrors, watching for anyone who might be following. I held my wife's hand tight, feeling her pulse racing under my thumb. Eventually, we arrived at a safe apartment, anonymous, sterile, with blackout curtains and heavy locks. An embassy security officer stayed nearby, posted in the hallway, alert and unsmiling. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief, but it was tangled up with exhaustion and dread. That night, as we lay in the dark, my wife whispered, "Do you think it's over?" I wanted to say yes, to give her comfort, but all I could do was hold her and listen to the unfamiliar silence, my mind churning with the images of those photos, the chilling promise of what might come next. I didn't sleep, not really. I kept expecting the quiet to shatter, to hear the soft tap of a camera lens against glass, the rustle of another envelope sliding under the door. Morning came, gray and sluggish. My daughter, sensing the mood, clung to her stuffed rabbit, not asking why we were in a new place or why we spoke in hushed voices. We made breakfast together, forcing ourselves through the motions of normal life, pretending the world hadn't tilted underneath our feet. But every moment, I was bracing for the next shock because by then, I understood what had started as petty corruption had grown into something colder, sharper, more dangerous. And there was no guarantee we were anywhere near safe. The new apartment was clean, bland, and silent as a hospital room. The embassy team had done their job. No windows facing the street, reinforced locks, nothing to give away who lived inside. But security couldn't stop the feeling that we were living on borrowed time, waiting for the next move in a game we hadn't agreed to play. The first day passed in a haze. Embassy staff checked in every few hours, bringing food, making sure we had what we needed. My wife tried to keep our daughter distracted. Puzzles, coloring books, movies on a battered tablet. I paced from room to room, tension knotted tight in my shoulders, replaying every detail. The notes, the photos, the shadows that always seemed to linger just out of sight. I called my commanding officer and gave him the bare bones of the situation. He listened in silence, then said, "Stay put. Don't do anything stupid. We'll coordinate with the embassy. Your job right now is to keep your family safe." Hearing it in his voice, no nonsense, steady, helped but didn't do much to unclench the fear in my chest. The city outside was a muted presence. Horns in the distance, footsteps in the hall. Every so often, the security officer would knock and ask if we'd noticed anything strange. Each time, I'd shake my head, even as I found myself jumping at every unexpected sound, every creak in the floorboards. Late on the second night, my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. The door of our old apartment, bathed in pale streetlight, a shadowy figure barely visible at the edge of the frame. It was grainy, but the message was clear. They knew we'd moved, and they were still watching. I showed it to the embassy agent on duty. His jaw clenched, and he called it in immediately. He told us, "We're increasing patrols. If you get any calls, messages, anything, let us know. Don't respond. Don't leave without us." The words sounded rehearsed, but there was a tension in his eyes that he couldn't hide. That night, sleep was impossible. My wife lay awake beside me, her breath catching every time the pipes rattled. Our daughter finally drifted off, her small hand curled around my fingers, seeking reassurance I wasn't sure I could give. By the third day, the embassy team decided to move us again, this time to a hotel used for diplomatic families in emergencies. It was brighter, more crowded, but strangely less comforting. Our windows looked out over a courtyard filled with children, but every time I heard a raised voice or a sudden laugh, my nerves jolted as if it were an alarm. We were told, in quiet voices, that the local police had picked up a man near our old building. He had a list of foreign names in his pocket, our address circled in red ink. They didn't say what else they'd found, only that we were doing the right thing by staying out of sight. "This will blow over," one of the embassy staff promised, "but it'll take time. These people are used to getting away with things. It doesn't sit well when someone pushes back." Each day, I called into work, checked in with my commander, tried to hold onto any sense of routine. My wife grew pale and restless, rarely sleeping, sometimes snapping at me for no reason. I tried to be patient, but the uncertainty ground us down little by little. Our daughter, though, was the only one who seemed almost untouched. She'd made friends in the hotel, a boy from another embassy family, a girl whose parents worked for the Red Cross. I watched her run in the courtyard, laughter bubbling up, and felt a mix of relief and guilt. The world had closed in on us, but she'd found a sliver of light, and I clung to it. Still, I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Every time I went downstairs to the lobby, I studied the faces around me, searching for anyone who lingered too long, whose eyes flickered toward me with recognition. At night, I checked the locks again and again, peering through the peephole into the hall, heart pounding at every sound. One afternoon, as I sat on the bed, my phone buzzed again. This time, a short video, someone walking past the hotel, the camera panning up to our window, pausing for just a second before moving on. My hands shook as I played it again and again. The message was unmistakable. "No matter where you go, we can find you." I forwarded the video to the embassy, voice cracking as I explained what had happened. They took it seriously, moving us to an interior room, away from the windows, and assigning 2 agents to rotate shifts outside her door. My wife pressed her forehead to mine that night, her whisper barely audible. "When does this end?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. I just held her, feeling the dread settle deeper, realizing that whatever game had started with a fake inspection sticker had spiraled so far out of control there was no telling where it might go next. The next morning, the embassy security team called us in for a meeting. They'd been talking to the local authorities, piecing together what they could from our case and several others. It was bigger than a single shakedown. There were whispers of a network, people in positions of power running an extortion racket targeting foreigners, military families, aid workers, anyone who didn't know the local system and couldn't fight back without causing an international scene. We're doing everything we can, the head of security told me, his eyes tired, but you need to be ready for anything. Don't trust anyone you don't know. If something doesn't feel right, assume it isn't. We'll let you know when it's safe to go home. For now, all we could do was wait and hope that the attention would move on, that the city would forget us, and that life, some version of it, would return.